What's going on YouTube, it is Alex here, and today I just wanted to pick up on my Beginner's Guide to Aquariums series. And this video is going to be how to properly care for aquatic plants. And as you can see in my tank, I have some nice plants, and in my tank I have quite easy plants. I haven't gone for anything too challenging. And that is my first tip for you guys who are new to setting up planted tanks. Or aquariums in general, is that you should go for stuff that is easy and not challenging, because if you go for something challenging, there's more of a chance that you're going to mess up, get it wrong, waste money, and harm the fish, which you don't want to be doing. So in this tank I have at the back I have Jungle Val. Jungle Val is the green plant at the back, and it's really fast growing, hardy, doesn't need much light, doesn't need CO2. Doesn't need a particularly good substrate. It does do better with a good substrate, and obviously the CO2 and lights make it grow a lot faster. But other than that, it's just sort of a general aquarium plant that you can get from pretty much anywhere. It's been in the hobby for a very long time, and a lot of people use it, and it usually takes over the tank pretty much. But if you keep it under control, keep trimming it and trimming off the runners and replanting them, then it's gonna look good. It's gonna really fill the space in the background part of your tank. Next I have Rotella indica, which is the reddy and yellowy plant here. Now that requires a lot of iron for it to stay red, and a lot of iron, which is why mine's gone yellow, because I'm not giving it quite enough iron. Now the yellowing doesn't mean that it's dying, it just means that it's got quite a bit of iron, because it's almost red. It's not bright green, it's yellow. So it's it's getting enough iron to do well. That's quite an easy plant. Again, that sort of plant needs lighting such as T5s, because if the light cannot penetrate lower down to the deeper levels where it is near the substrate, then the lower leaves will die, and you'll basically end up with a lot of leaves at the top of the plant and no leaves down here, just a bare stem, which is going to look pretty stupid. So you need a light that can get through, and that's another reason why you shouldn't plant them too close together, which is a mistake I made. But mine seem to be doing alright under these T5s that I have. Crypts at the front, they're easy to grow, good plants. So all crypts are fairly easy. Do your research. Java fern, that's really easy. That's a great beginner plant. Amazon swords, not so much a beginner plant, but they're pretty hardy, and if you treat them right, they're going to do well. So now we talked about the plants you can get, let's talk about lighting. So in this tank I have two high output T5 bulbs. This is a 35-gallon tank, and each bulb's 24 watts, so a total of 48 watts over this tank. With T5s you need slightly less watts per gallon than you do with T8s, because the light intensity is more and it can penetrate to lower levels of the tank, whereas T8s couldn't. So you can get away with having slightly less watts per gallon, but it's not so much watts per gallon that matter in a planted tank like most people think. It's actually colour temperature, again not as important, but still quite important. What it really is spectrum, because if you have a full spectrum bulb, your plants are going to do great. If you don't have a full spectrum bulb, just say you have like an ordinary house bulb for example, your plants aren't going to do very well, because they're not going to get the type of light that they need to grow. So some good lighting is important, so go do your research on lighting. Substrate. In this tank I have Tropica plant substrate, obviously a substrate specifically for plants, and if you're really going to be going seriously about growing plants, then you're going to need some of that. Obviously you need some gravel or sand to put on the top of it, preferably gravel. I have this rounded edge black quartz gravel. But in the tank I just set up over there, which is going to be for a beta and some Harlequin rasboras, I think. I've just used gravel and some Rotella cuttings, and Rotella will be fine in just gravel, but the plant substrate really helps. Next thing I'm going to talk about is CO2. CO2 can be used in any planted tank, provided there are enough plants to use up the CO2, otherwise you'll just be poisoning your fish with the CO2. In really heavily planted tanks you're probably going to need CO2, because plants are going to be competing for it and they might not be getting enough. So in a tank like this it's not necessary as such, but it's more needed in a tank like this over a lightly planted tank, because I have quite a lot of plants in here. to use up the CO2. And you can either use a pressurized CO2, which I have behind me, or you can use this, which is liquid CO2. And this is by Seachem, and this is called Flourish XL, and it's an organic carbon, and just tells you what to dose. And obviously it's literally just like normal CO2 but in liquid form. On this subject of Seachem stuff, I'm going to show you all the other stuff you're going to need if you're really going for a serious planted tank. This is Seachem Flourish, and this is just made up of like minerals, trace elements, different sort of stuff that plants need. And this doesn't contain nitrates and phosphates, because the nitrates and phosphates which your plants need are going to come from A, the fish's waste, and B, the decomposition of fish food, which leads to phosphate levels. And you want to keep nitrates and phosphates relatively low, because this stuff here is really important for the plants. Nitrates and phosphates are as well, but if you have a really high nitrate and phosphate level, then you're just going to grow a ton of algae. So this is important for plant growth. Just regular fertilizer. You don't have to use Seachem Flourish. You can use Tropica, Aquacare. There are loads of them out there. There's Tetra, Leaf Zone. There's loads. Next we have potassium, and this is basically just to help with really fast growth. If you notice that the older leaves on your Amazon swords, for example, are turning yellow, or leaves are just going brown and dying, or your plant's growing really slowly, then you can use potassium. That really speeds up growth and stops the yellowing of the leaves. So that's another thing there. I already showed you that. Next we've got iron, and as you can see from the picture on the front, there's a red plant, and that's because red plants need lots of iron. So for example, this rotella here, that's going to need a lot of iron, which is why I use this iron here. Next and last we have trace element, and trace elements aren't as important as the other things, but it's still, you know, they help with colour, they help with growth, and these actually help with root growth as well, the trace elements. And as Dustin says, roots are key to plants. They store minerals, they store nutrients, they anchor it down, they keep the plant alive in a way. So yeah, this is important as well. So, host of products there, teamed with CO2 and highlighting, you're going to do good, and with a substrate. But this is where many people do things wrong. What they do is they go overboard on one thing and don't do enough on the other. So say they'll get like 4 high output T5 bulbs, have just a plain sand or gravel as their substrate, don't dose with fertilizers, and have like a really low fish load, for example. I mean, fish load doesn't matter that much, but let's say there's no nutrients for the plants, they don't have a good substrate, you know, you're not dosing with any CO2 at all, so they haven't got any carbon. That highlighting is not going to be able to be used up by the plants, because there's nothing else for the plant to use apart from the light, so it can't use it all. So basically the light just goes to growing algae, and that's when you're going to grow mad algae. Same as if you're dosing with loads of CO2 and fertilizers and everything, but you don't have highlights, the algae's just going to start growing, because the plants need balance. If you have highlights, you can use CO2 and high fertilizers along with good substrate. If you don't have the good lights, don't use CO2, don't use fertilizers, because you're just going to grow algae. The key to not growing algae in a planted tank is get the balance right between light, substrate, fertilizers and CO2. You have to have it in balance. And then you're going to have a really nice, lush planted tank. And I'm just going to show you when plants produce too much, well, not too much oxygen, but excess oxygen just to stay on the leaves. Basically the plants start to pearl. So if you notice at the top of these stems, I don't know how well you can see that. Yeah, there's little bubbles just coming out every now and again, just there. And if I go over to the other side as well, if you notice on the top of the stems where they've been like cut off, just bubbles coming out there. And also when you do well with your Amazon swords, they're going to produce runners like this. So you've obviously got the big leaves around it, and then in the middle there you can see a little still thin stem, tall thin stem coming up with a little leaf on it. So that's what's going to happen when you get the balance right, and you take my advice basically. So I hope this has been helpful for you. If you've got any suggestions or anything I missed out, then feel free to comment. Any questions, again, feel free to ask. If you could check out my channel, be sure to like, comment and subscribe. Thank you.